All right. Without question, we hope that you are doing extremely well today, and we are happy that you have decided to join us for this week's episode of Our Ancestors' Voices, a weekly program sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Today, our topic is discussing the attacks against Iran. Very important topic, obviously. This backward cesspool, United Snakes government has been bombing the Iranian people daily. They allegedly have stopped for a few days, but that hasn't stopped the Zionist state of Israel and continuing the assaults against Iran. So we're going to break down what is the history of this? What is the history of this conflict with Iran? What are the variables that go into it? And how we definitely need to view this and all conflicts instigated by imperialism through a different lens than what we get through the capitalist corporatized media. So we're glad that you're here to join us for that. We give honor and respect to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. We stand with them, we sit with them, we do everything that we can to help them to have the support they need to be victorious in their struggle around these lands that we exist in today, which correctly belong to them. And on our African ancestors, we continue to do everything we can every day to live up to the uh, the mission that they have provided to us. I'm full disclosure, extremely exhausted today. I've spent all day since Friday, three different sessions, engaged in intense ideological training, as well as training around how to uh, conduct self defense, ideological training, self defense training with a number of people, three different groups of people. A lot of them were very young, like high school age folks. And so I'm exhausted today, but my spirit is high because this is the thing that drives me and should drive all of us is the ability to work with people and to give them to make a contribution towards them being able to make an even greater contribution. You know, I told them all weekend I'm not here forever, but my mission now is to help you all be able to carry on this struggle, this glorious struggle that we're engaged in. So, you know, they were thanking me profusely when I left about noon this morning or this afternoon, whatever that is. And, you know, I just kept telling them, thank you. You know, this was an honor. This is an honor to do this work. I mean, that's honestly how I believe we should see it. So that they asked me where I get the energy, and I told them the ancestors. You know, our ancestors waged relentless resistance to allow us to be here today. And they didn't do that so that we could, you know, sit our behinds up here and eat barbecue and 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 sweet potato pie and not think about anybody except ourselves and what's going in our gut. They did that for us because they knew that we had to have the ability to reach our full potential so that we can make a proper contribution towards helping our people move forward in a collective sense. And by doing that, we help the entire planet move forward. That's what they understood 100, 200, 300, 500 years ago that we don't even have enough sense today to understand. So, no, you know, I'm tired, but it's a good tired. I'm glad I do it every weekend if I needed to, and most of the weekends I do, to be able to make whatever kind of contribution that I possibly can. So just honored to do that. And moving on, we make our this screen always jumps, so I forgive that, but we'll correct it again. But our Ancestors' Voices is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, AAPRP. And the APRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass Pan African political party based in Africa. Talked about that an awful lot this weekend. Gave a million examples. Our objective is Pan Africanism, which you define correctly as a united socialist Africa. That's what we believe to be the solution to the problems that we face. And that work to achieve Pan-Africanism, it's outlined in the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare by Kwame Nkrumah, who is the founder and ideologue, along with Secretary and Amilcar Cabral, for our work in the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And this program, one of many, Our Ancestors' Voices, it's hosted each week by myself, Ajamu, and my biological, ideological daughter, Shakura, Dr. Shakura Umi. And so, to get us started on this topic, the attacks against Iran, I'll turn it over to Shakura.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Greetings, everyone. We hope that you are well. Really excited to talk about today's topic. We understand that we are up against the clock, trying to push back against the propaganda that is out there. And we hope that you are becoming more wise to the fact that what capitalist media is sharing with you, promoting, offering, whether it's through social media or whether you stream the news or read about the news, or if you're still watching the news, you must understand that it is only to meet the need in the best interests of the capitalist society, which means that if there are statements that are made that are not valuing humanity, you should pretty much understand that there's probably some mistruths and some lies that are taking over. And then it's up to you to try to research that and figure out what part you can actually look deeper into, because we know that we can't really trust the system to educate us in the first place. And that's how it should be. We shouldn't expect the system that has been oppressing many different groups for thousands of years to suddenly be humane and to be treating us correctly. Like that's not the track record, right? So we should understand that there should be a lot of mistrust, and we should understand that that shouldn't be where we're getting our information. We even encourage you, even beyond this 1 hour seminar, to still continue to do more research, even beyond that. It's to never be comfortable where you're just expecting other people to provide information to you that can enlighten you or educate you. You should always be taking initiative for the kind of information that you want to ascertain and get your hands on, so that you can really start to build your own understanding of something and have that kind of responsibility to find ethical information. There's so much value in that. And more importantly, it's a moral responsibility, right? So, this is how we kind of think about that. And we could start with talking about why trusting corporate media is really not something we would recommend, right? So, if we think about the Rockefeller family, how they own dominant stock interests in the network TV stations such as the NBC and the CNBC, the MSNBC, CNN. They also own controlling interests within Chevron Oil. It is also not a mistake that a lot of the corporate media that we are encouraging you not to trust is the same corporate media that has taken a stand to stand with Israel and not Palestine, or taken a stand to stand with the French or the Portuguese or even the British instead of standing with some of the African nations that have been under attack. None of this is by accident. All of this is by intention, with purpose, and by strategic plan. And so it is up to us to continue to take responsibility for what that process looks like. We understand that, in doing our own research, it's important for us to stay vigilant to organizations that are anti Palestine. And I don't know about you all, but I'm constantly updating my list so that I can know which new organizations I don't want to support. And really, none of them, because they're all representing the capitalist interest. But you also need to feed your family and you need to survive. So, trying to figure out ways that you can find other ways to use, as Baba Ajamu always says, you can use the master's tools against them, right? Like, what does that look like? We know that Zoom and Instagram, for example, are corporations used to exploit and to harm people. But we are choosing to use those corporations today to educate you all and to educate ourselves, right? So that's what we mean when we say using the master's tools against them. So it's no surprise, that the Rockefellers would be able to own a controlling interest with Chevron Oil. As we know, oil has been a really big part of this conversation. And the same basic model is true for all corporate media. Any expectation of objectivity when it comes to watching the news and what's about to happen with Iran is fantasy thinking. And it's also important for you to kind of think more about What is the gain? What is the benefit? What do you gain by listening to capitalist media spew out and share lies with you, spew out and share mistrust with you? How do you grow as a person because of that, right? And what's the harm if you actually were to research things on your own and to get more information on your own? You have to remember that your brain is a muscle, and we can't rely on capitalist media to help inform it, to inflate it, to help promote it, to help grow it. That is completely on us. Also, this society makes it look attractive and sexy to be ignorant. That's why information is so easily hidden in plain sight, because the system is set up where it does not expect people to have the tools and the skills that they need to go out and to find the kind of information that they need. This is why we always talk about the difference between researching something. Whereas if you quote unquote Google it, a lot of people would say you have researched it. But I would argue that's not really what research looks like. You know, being able to take facts, being able to take mistruths, being able to cross compare them, being able to back them, being able to see if multiple sources are saying the same thing as that one source. That's not something that can happen over 5 minutes if you're researching something. That takes an incredible amount of time. It also requires you to review several different texts so that you can try to see if there's a consistency with the information that you have found. And more importantly, one of the rules we have in the party is you have to make sure that the information and the sources that you're looking at are credible to begin with. Are they credible to begin with? No. Capitalism is always lying to us. So we can't even trust when we look up things on Google, because how do we really know it's true? Everything that's out there is designed to maintain the interests of the capitalist system. And if we are not for that, then we need to understand that we should take it with a grain of salt and do our best to try to cross examine and to make sure it is actually consistent, because a lot of times it is not. And this is why we can't allow people to tell us stuff. We have to have our own means of finding that information. The photo you see on the slide represents the Rockefeller family, one of the ruling class capitalist families for centuries. Next slide, please. Thank you. And the US war machine. Okay, so since the 1900s, as far back as the last 126 years, the US military personnel has been in conflict with other countries approximately 100 out of those years, for pretty much about 80% of that time period. So that speaks volumes, because we already talked about how, for this 126 years, this personnel has been in conflict, but, definitely 100 of those 126 years, for the most part, a majority of that time, there has been a consistent issue where it's been a period of conflict. And so, kind of thinking more about that, we can even look at the image and see, the US war machine. It says an illustrated encyclopedia of the American military equipment and strategy, right? And so, kind of thinking more about that image and thinking about how there has been a consistent propaganda message, but also ideology and way of life, in terms of kind of thinking more about what US military is supposed to represent, how we're supposed to go about um, interacting with it, but also engaging with it, how we're supposed to show respect for it, how we're supposed to do all of these things. And I'm saying how we're supposed to, because that's also propaganda. It's not just the media and the messages behind how we should interact with the military. It's also the expectation that this country has put on us, even though the consistency across the board does not really add up. For example, it is imperative that we understand that a lot of times where we are standing in position of something is not really to be represented by the same country that is oppressing us. And so when we think about the US military, what I try to remember is that my taxes are going towards bombs being funded, towards children starving, towards people who want to be able to live in peace and be unharmed. They are not able to do that. It goes towards medical issues and harming people. It goes towards ruining medical supplies and putting a stop to people getting access to medical supplies. It goes to killing people, obviously. It also goes to people being tortured because they stood up for what was right by the same system and the same group of military people who were coming to harm them in the first place. And it's important that we understand that. It's really important that we understand that. I remember that we were talking about Iran many, many seminars ago. And for someone who studies health and studies, lactation and the importance of us being able to understand how health disparities can be created from war, how health disparities and how, global destruction and land destruction can be created from war. I keep thinking about how I want to support our Palestinian comrades when they do get their land back because their land has been destroyed. And I am thinking about their water supplies. I am thinking about their electrical grids. I am thinking about ways that my Pan Africanist ideologies can help them right now because they are going to need it to rebuild their land. I'm thinking about the destruction that has taken place on my land, on my continent, and how I need to be doing more to help with that. And so when we think more deeply about that, we have to remember the seminar that we had many, many years ago, where Baba Ajamu talked about how the bombs that have been dropped in places like Iran and places like Palestine, even in places on the continent, not only do they obviously kill people and they have global destruction and land destruction, but even to some extent, if a person is not killed by said bomb, they still can be impacted from other health related issues. For example, respiratory issues. They could have inhaled the smoke or the steam or whatever is coming from the bomb, and now there's some respiratory issues that are connected to kidney failure. There might be some cancerous cells that are developing. The example you gave, Baba Ajamu, that was really hit home for me was you talked about, not hit home, it hit my soul. You talked about how people who can lactate are breathing in the fumes and it's impacting their lactation milk. So now their children are getting sick and they can't really understand or make a correlation to it because maybe all they have is lactation milk. They might not have formula or some other thing. And so they're just trying to keep their children alive. And so they're giving them this milk, not knowing that the milk is tainted and contaminated because how would they be able to look inside of the breast and see that this milk is no good, right? And it's not like they have masks, right? It's not like wearing a mask might even prevent you from tainting and toxifying your milk. And so, like, that's just evil to me. That is just evil, and it's evil that these folks would do this to these people, and then these children would be impacted. And let's not forget about the parent, right? Like, yes, the milk is impacted, but who's to say that you breathing in these toxins from these bombs is not correlated with ovarian cancer, is not correlated with you having cervical cancer, is not correlated with you having breast cancer? Like, who's to say that there's not a connection to that? We haven't done enough research, I would argue, on it to know that there is absolutely no correlation. How do we know that? And are we sampling the right people to get that information out there, to understand who this is happening to? Probably not, because those are the same people that are under attack. So why would we take the time to do a focus group with them? Right? And I'm being facetious because we should take the time to do that. But this system doesn't care about them. This system doesn't care about their health. This system doesn't care if they live or die. This system doesn't care if they have cancer. This system doesn't care if their children have cancer. This system doesn't even care if their milk stops coming in and the baby starved to death. This system doesn't care. It doesn't care about any of those things. It should, because that's what holds on to our humanity. But they don't have any humanity left. So that's why they don't care. So the US capitalist economy of the US, like the entire capitalist world, is profit driven. Never forget that, which means automatically that conflict of the military nature is inevitable. It will always be a significant aspect of everything that happens by the US. And we really need to think more in detail about that because that is going to really start to shape how we can move forward. Understanding the capitalist economy connected to the profit driven system, but also understanding how the US military is designed to protect said capitalism, to protect it, to make sure that it continues to be a system that enforces and runs and determines and decides how this country operates. US capitalism and military are in position to protect capitalism so that they can be in cahoots with Israel, so that they can be in cahoots with Europe. They're all buddy buddies and they're all designed to be greedy and to get money, 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 no matter what. No matter who lives are lost, no matter who dies in the process, no matter how many countries are devastated, no matter how many forests are wiped out, no matter how many children, their schools are bombed. They don't care about any of that, you all. And we must wake up. We must wake up because what's happening in Iran is not mutually exclusive to what will or what has already happened to people here on this soil right here. So we have to also get rid of the notion that we don't care and that it's not impacting us because how good has that done for us? How far has that gotten us being individualistic in a system that is so selfish it doesn't even care about you? No, 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 no. We need more humanity. We need more collectivism. That's how we've gotten here because our ancestors didn't have that same selfish ideology. Our ancestors didn't believe that they could just think about themselves. Our ancestors died for us. They sacrificed for us. They held on as long as they could for us, you all. And if you haven't really started to think about that, you should sit down and take some time to think about that. You would not be here without your ancestors holding on for you. You would not be here without that. They did that for you so that you could live a better life and that you could fight for a better life. Not for us to sit here and be comfortable and to not do anything about the things that we know are wrong in the world. We're either a part of the solution or we're a part of the problem. So we have to really think more deeply about that. And part of that is understanding that the US military system has always been designed to protect capitalism, to protect the profit driven system by any means necessary. So, what does that mean for us? Especially if we don't want to protect the system. Well, definitely consider supporting a Pan Africanist organization while you continue thinking about other things that you can do. We do encourage you to join a Pan Africanist organization. But if you're not ready to do that, we have African Liberation Day coming up and we need your donation. We are especially trying to really encourage in person African Liberation Day events this year. So we are really trying to raise the money because we want to have some speakers that are represented from our Haitian comrades. We want to have some Palestinian speakers. We want to have some indigenous speakers. We want to have some speakers maybe from our Asian descent comrades. And so those speakers need funding, you all. We need food at these events to feed our people. These events, the venues cost money. The comrade in Oakland was telling me that for us to rent the space per hour, you all, it's $175 an hour, you all. I had no idea it was that expensive. For some reason, I thought he said 75 an hour. I missed the 100 part. This work is expensive, is what I'm saying. So we need your donations. And if you cannot come to African Liberation Day, please donate. Please donate every day for the month of May. Try to give us $1 a day if you can, because we will benefit from it and be able to use it for our event that we are organizing in Oakland. With that, I will yield it back to Baba Ajamu. And with nothing else, remember that your political education is up to you. You have the power to change that. And it's never too early for you to teach yourself new tricks. Ashe.
Ashe, Obrigada, Asante Sana, Ngoni, Midasi. Just one correction. The majority of the money that we'll talk about at the end that we're asking you to donate for African Liberation Day goes to all of the African Liberation Day commemorations we're doing in Africa. Very, very little, if any, of that money will come to Oakland. We do that out of our pockets, just straight up. We just house that ourselves. So, you're not donating for us to do what we're doing in Oakland. It's really for our African Liberation Days in Africa, in Ghana, in Burkina Faso, in Guinea-Bissau, in Sierra Leone, in Kenya, in Zambia, in Tanzania, in Zimbabwe. That's where that money will primarily be going. So just to clarify, make sure that's clear. Thank you, Shakura. And I just want to get into the history of Iran because what's happening with this entire attack against Iran is it's the same playbook by these no good bastards. They use the same playbook. So they got you watching this TV news or listening to it or whatever you're doing, XM radio, however you're getting information in the capitalist system, beyond you engaged in an independent political education process. Because if you're not doing that, you're doing those first things I talked about, or you just don't know anything at all. So you're using, whether whatever it is, TV news, internet news, social media news, Sirius XM radio, whatever the hell it is, the narrative that you're being provided is number one, Iran is trying to build a nuclear weapon. And they don't have the right to have a nuclear weapon. That's the dominant narrative. And our response to that is who the hell? There's only one country in human history that has used a nuclear weapon on human beings. And that country is not Iran. It's the goddamn United Snakes of America. They're the ones who dropped nuclear bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima in 1945. They did that, killing thousands of people. Nobody else in the world has dropped nuclear weapons on anybody except these no good bastards right here. So who the hell are they to dictate who has a nuclear weapon? So don't give us that shit that, well, nobody should have a nuclear weapon. Then you should start with the no good bastards who used it. You shouldn't be talking about Iran or anybody else. You should be talking about the no good bastards that killed people with nuclear weapons. You start there if you're going to talk about getting rid of nuclear weapons. Otherwise, if you're not talking about that, then if the no good bastards who've used it have it, then Iran is logical to want to have a weapon to counteract and ensure their safety and security. That makes perfect sense to me. If you're my enemy and you got all the weapons in the world, I'm sitting here like, well, I don't want to be violent. I'm just basically signing my own death certificate. So that part. Secondly, the other piss poor narrative out here is that Iran is a oppressive regime. Okay, now, that's a discussion for the people in Iran to have. They have every right to decide what type of society they want to have. If they want to have a Shiite society, then God damn it, that's their right to have it. I don't want to live in a Shiite Islamic society. I don't want to live in a Christian society. I don't want to live in under any religious society. But if that's what they decide to do, they have a right to do that. That's none of my business. Okay, but again, this backward ass country is in no position to talk about any country on earth being oppressive and barbaric. That's not even serious. That's a joke for this country to talk about that. And if you hear that all the time and it becomes normalized for you, then you're a part of that joke. There's just no other way around that. That's the other part of that piss poor analysis. The last part of it is that Iran is a terrorist country. I mean, you already know what we're going to say about that. Who the hell is this backward ass, no good bastard run country to call anybody a terrorist? There isn't a single entity in the history of human existence who have killed more people than this country. That's an undisputed fact. An undisputed fact. Nowhere in history has that happened in so many places. Let me say it like that because, there have been plenty of butchers and barbaric regimes throughout the world. Leopold in Belgium killed 25 million in the Congo. Obviously, we know about Nazi Germany. Obviously, you probably don't know about the Germans in Namibia killing hundreds of thousands of people. So this has happened. But there hasn't been a single country that's killed more people in more countries than this backward regime right here. So stop watching that nonsense because what they're trying to do is subtly convince you that by taking a neoliberal position on Iran, that you're doing something to develop an analysis about this situation. And by accepting that neo-colonial or neoliberal position, you're subconsciously permitting yourself to normalize accepting imperialism's agenda about Iran. And if you do that, then you subconsciously allow yourself to accept whatever happens to Iran and the Iranian people. And that's why we're saying that. And so this is why, we harp on political education. That's why it's so important, because there's history here. There's a problem that the U.S. has with Iran that can be traced back to the 1950s. You all like almost 80 years ago. This problem goes back. And it goes back to the Iranian people democratically electing Mohammad Mossadegh, who's shown in the picture on the left. This man was democratically elected. These no good bastards are always talking about how they support democracy, and no country has removed violently more democratically elected leaders than the United Snakes of America, the so-called lover of democracy. They're the ones who staged an illegal coup d'etat to remove democratically elected President Mohammad Mossadegh in Iran. They're the ones who removed the democratically elected president in Indonesia in 1965. They're the ones who violently assassinated the democratically elected prime minister of the Congo, Patrice Lumumba, in 1961. They're the ones who violently removed the democratically elected president of Guatemala, Arbenz, in 1954. They're the ones who have been trying to assassinate the democratically supported leaders in socialist Cuba since 1959. They're in no position to talk about democracy. And you're a damn fool if you let them talk to you about that and you believe them and you parrot their talking points about this being a Democrat. How the hell this is going to be a democratic country and you don't know a damn thing? How the hell is this going to be a democratic country and this you pay tax dollars and they're using your money to remove all the democratically elected leaders on earth that don't agree with them and their violent perverted agenda to control and destroy everybody on earth who doesn't want to go along with their backward ass agenda. That has nothing to do with democracy. So Mossadegh was elected, and once he was elected in 1951, he instantly enacted a series of social programs that uplifted the education and opportunities for women and the downtrodden who were in Iran. And this led to the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, and the British intelligence M16 to conspire a coup d'etat in 1953 to remove Mohammad Mossadegh. And they did that. And from there, the Shah of Iran was installed as the leader in Iran. And all of those gains that were made under Mossadegh were immediately eliminated. Now women couldn't go to college. They couldn't do anything. Everybody was oppressed. Anybody that spoke out against the Shah of Iran was disappeared, imprisoned, murdered, any one of those three things. Or sometimes all three things happened to them. And this criminal, the Shah of Iran, implemented criminal oppression and repression against the Iranian people. And this heightened the resistance of the Iranian people to his regime. And this led to the 1979 so called Iranian uprising, or they call it a revolution. And this is when the Ayatollah Khomeini, who is in the middle picture, became the spiritual leader of the Iranian people and basically the leader of the country. And if you know the history, the students in Tehran, Iran, captured the U.S. embassy in Tehran, Iran, and they took over the building for 444 days as a part of this revolutionary effort to get rid of the Shah of Iran. And once they did that, if you go back and study the history, one of the first things they did is, U.S. embassies around the world are housed with federal employees who do the work. Everyday people, they just happen to work for the federal government, and they happen to do that overseas. So what the Iranian Revolution did is they released and sent all of the African employees in the U.S. Embassy in Iran, released them, released all of the women. They only held a couple of them because they suspected them to be connected in some way to U.S. intelligence, to the Central Intelligence Agency. But the vast majority of them, they released them and allowed them to come back to the U.S. And Ayatollah Khomeini issued a statement in Persian. And in that statement, he said that we're releasing them because they are not the source of the problem in the U.S. They are oppressed like we are. So they understood something that a lot of us today, right, damn near 50 years after that, don't understand yet about the relationship. But this uprising happened, and again, I'm not saying that everything about what the Ayatollah Khomeini did and the Shiite government there. Again, I don't want to live in any religious society. I don't believe in monotheism. I don't believe in a God in the sky. So why would I want to live somewhere like that? I would never want to do that. But that's a decision that they make, and as long as they can make it in as democratic a fashion as possible, and it's consistent with their beliefs, and based on how I've studied Iran, I don't see anything that convinces me that the majority of people there don't agree with that. All I see is the bourgeoisie element who prospered under the Shah of Iran, who are pissed because they were no longer allowed to do that and exploit the interests of the masses of people in Iran. I see them complaining, but we're on opposite sides of the class war. But so that's a decision that they have to make. But this is what happened in the country. And from there, we can talk about Iran's regional influence. And there on the screen, I have a picture of the African civil service employees some of them who were released from Iran. And they held a press conference and they talked about it in 1979. They talked about how they were very well treated by the people in Iran, and the people in Iran told them, like, the U.S. government doesn't care about you. We care about you. We're going to let you go because you are not our enemy. So, we got to understand that, you all. It's too many Negroes out here. Oh, our government, we got to do something about Iran. Iran, our government, you ain't got no goddamn government. You don't have no goddamn military here. You don't have anything here. All you have is your slave labor. That's the only thing you own in this backward ass country. I don't care if you can own as much property as you want. You don't own a damn thing. You don't own that because you're going to die and that's still going to be there. Okay. So that's not, that's an illusion that they've convinced us to believe. Right. And it should be clear that the majority of people in the world understand our situation better than most of us here. Right. So once the Shia regime was in place, Iran began work to become a regional power. And this is behind the allegation of Iran being a terrorist country, because one of the challenges was to try to bring some stability in Lebanon. If you look at a map, Lebanon sits between Iran, Syria, and the Zionist state of Israel, right? And so Lebanon became really, once the Shia regime came to power in Iran, Lebanon, which is next door there, as I just mentioned, became a focal point of battles around who would control that region, especially in the Bekaa Valley region in southern Lebanon. And what happened is the Zionist state of Israel began to encroach on that territory because they wanted to be in an offensive position against their enemies, of which Iran was, in first place in that regard. And as a result of that, Iran, protecting their interests, began to help support militias that existed in Lebanon, specifically Hezbollah, the Party of God. And they began to arm and help train Hezbollah. And Hezbollah began to wage battle against Israel, as they should. What the hell kind of logic is that? The backward racist Zionist state of Israel, they can go wherever the hell they want to go. They can they're dropping bombs today. They can do whatever the hell they want. But then when people defend themselves against them, then they're the terrorists. Malcolm X told us about that backward kind of logic 60 plus years ago. And we still don't get it. We still listen to the master and let the master define for us who the enemy really is. So I'm saying, I'm not biting my tongue. I'm saying that Hezbollah has a right to engage in military operations against the state of Israel. No question about that. Anybody question that? You don't know what the hell you're talking about. You don't know the history that we're talking about. Hezbollah only has about 50,000 fighters. But what Hezbollah does, if you remember the war and so-called war in 2006, where Israel and Hezbollah got into it in southern Lebanon, and Israel was unable to, get the upper hand on Hezbollah. And the reason why that happened is that the Zionist state of Israel over the years has bombed Lebanon into submission. And they've tried to defend themselves, and all of these things have led to a lot of events, more than we have time to talk about today. But one of those things is in 1983, a U.S. military barracks was bombed, and I think 200 something U.S. Marines were killed, right? And this is the kind of stuff that they use to justify saying that Iran is a terrorist entity, because the accusation is that Iran armed the forces who carried out that explosion in that region. But you all forget, these U.S. Marines were in that country. They have no right to be in that country. They aren't wanted there. They're not supposed to be there. They don't have any mission there to build up the country. Their mission is there, just like every mission for the U.S. military, is to protect U.S. capitalist interests, protect capitalist and imperialist interests worldwide. Period. That's the only reason why. That's the only reason why the U.S. sends military anywhere on earth. So these people have a right to defend themselves, and clearly they're going to do that. So if you have family in the U.S. military, you better be talking to them. You better be talking to them, because if they're so uninformed and so confused that they take their asses into these countries and something happens to them, don't come to us crying about that like you get no empathy here. You go in somebody's house and they take you out, they have every right to do that. You shouldn't have been in their house. I can tell you one thing: I'm not going to be killed by anything happening in Lebanon, Hezbollah, Iran, because I'm not going to ever be doing anything to jeopardize their or anybody else's interest who's just trying to live in peace. If there was no Zionist, racist, terrorist state of Israel, there probably wouldn't even be a Hezbollah. There probably wouldn't even be a militant Shia regime in Iran, because if you study this history, there didn't used to be all of that until Israel became the major center source of confusion and chaos in the Middle East. Stop talking about the Palestinians being the source of the confusion and the chaos in the Middle East. It's the Zionist state of Israel. And all these folks are trying to do is protect themselves. So Iran is doing that with Hezbollah, with Hamas. They're doing that. They have every right to do that. They're a sovereign nation. The U.S. supports uh, entities that it wants to support to protect its interests. Don't say they don't do that. They do that everywhere on earth, the U.S. does. Israel is nothing but a surrogate of the U.S. Israel is nothing but a lapdog of the U.S. Israel is nothing but a pit bull. Apologies to my dog Zuri here, who's a pit bull. But Israel is nothing but a pit bull for the Zionist state of Israel. Zuri comes in here every week when I do the program, and she's looking at me like, dude, don't put me in that. I'm for peace and justice around the world. I'm not. Don't call me out. You're right, Zuri. Okay, I'll think of something else to call them. But that's the point. Y'all get it? Is that they have as much right to defend themselves as U.S. imperialism. As long as they're attacking them, they have a right to do that. The Somalis off the coast of Somalia have a right to get in ships and defend their borders. They don't have a navy, but you let them convince you to call them pirates, but you don't call the U.S. terrorist navy pirates when they go in the Middle East, in the Strait of Hormuz, and everywhere there, and dominate their interests. What the hell does that have to do with security for the U.S.? How is Iran a threat to the U.S. unless the U.S. is a threat to Iran? If you take away the U.S. threat to Iran, which is irrefutable, Iran has never overthrown a U.S. government. The U.S. has overthrown an Iranian government. We just talked about that. So get your facts straight, right? Some contradictions. Iran's positioning, you know, that's allowed them to be used in a conflict. They fought an 8-year war in the 80s against Iraq, and at that time, Iraq was basically a surrogate for the U.S. The U.S. trained and armed Iraq to fight Iran because they were trying to, eliminate this regime who was supporting the mujahideen all over the world, the Islamic soldiers. So they wanted to, make that regime unstable. So they engaged in this support for um, these forces, the Saddam Hussein, who was supposed to be one of the presidents, along with Hafez Assad of Syria at that time, for the Arab Ba'ath Party. The Ba'ath Party started in 1948 as an Arab nationalist party by a man named George Koresh, and the Ba'ath Party was really the Arab equivalent to the All African People's Revolutionary Party. But over time, unfortunately, that mission, you know how it is. Like a lot of people call themselves Pan Africanists, and they're not fighting for the unity of Africa under scientific socialism. They're saying they're Pan Africanists, and all they want to do is make some money out of exploiting African resources like the capitalists do. So, even though they were calling themselves Ba'athist Party, the actions they engaged in, clearly there's contradictions. And Saddam Hussein was one of those contradictions. But certainly by the time he got to the point where he was fighting the U.S., hey, they were on the right side of history. But the point here is that this war was designed to weaken Iran, the Iran-Iraq war from 1980 to 1988. And, this was unfortunate for the entire region. The consciousness of the Shia region, it cannot be questioned, though, as it relates to understanding the oppression of people around the world, whether it's the oppression the Palestinian people suffer, certainly the oppression African people suffer. They demonstrated that. All these countries around the world, you all, have demonstrated their consciousness and understanding of the oppression African people experience in the U.S. China, the Chinese Revolution under Mao Zedong, issued a paper. Mao wrote it, talking about racism here in the United States. He did that in the 50s. And then he gave refuge to Robert Williams, an African freedom fighter from North Carolina, who was besieged by the U.S. government. We talked about Nguyen Ao Thach, who was better known as Ho Chi Minh, the leader of the Viet Minh Front in Vietnam, who waged a 10-year war against U.S. imperialism. And when Ao Thach went to school here in this country, in Harlem, he lived in Harlem. He washed dishes at a soul food restaurant in Harlem, this Vietnamese man. So he understood the race contradiction here extremely well. And you saw the movie Dead Presidents with Lorenz Tate and Chris Tucker and uh, Keith David and all of those actors, Bokeem, Woodbine. And in that movie, when they're in Vietnam, they pick up the leaflets, "Black man, go home. This is not your war." That was real, you all, because the Vietnamese were attempting to demoralize Africans were almost 30% of the troops in Vietnam from the U.S. So they were attempting to demoralize that and cause friction, and it worked. That's why the U.S. lost the Vietnam War. And African Vietnam vets talk to them, and they will tell you at that time, we began to realize the contradictions. That was happening in Vietnam with the leaflets and other things. The Black Power movement was happening here. And as my father told me, why the hell should I be over there? Because they sent him over there. Why should I be over here? He was one of the early people to go in the mid 60s, early 60s. And he was like, why should I be over there? And I'm from Louisiana. I don't have freedom here. And they're telling me I'm supposed to fight for somebody's freedom in Vietnam. and he didn't even have it. All these contradictions began to assert themselves. And so the African troops began to say, we're just trying to make sure we protect each other. We ain't fighting for America. And this was one of the key ingredients. They're not going to tell you this, but this is one of the key ingredients that allowed them to, get in a position where when they began the Tet Offensive, you saw that in the movie, what is that, Platoon, at the end where the Vietnamese came up out the ground and waged a frontal assault against U.S. troops and whooped their ass. No question about that. Whooped their ass. Okay? They understood the contradictions in this country. Iran understood the contradictions in this country. They released the Africans. Cuba understands the contradictions in this country. They have given refuge to multiple African freedom fighters here. They have supported Africa for decades now. Everybody around the world understands our plight today except us here, because we're sitting here listening to our enemies' analysis about who we are and what's happening with us. So the takeaways of this, if you paid attention, Iran has a very innovative and interesting way that they're waging the propaganda against U.S. imperialism. They're using Lego messaging and they're using hip hop lyrics to do that. And I mean, that, you should listen to some of it. You can hear it. If you go online, you can hear it. And it's having an impact around the world, right? And that's a good thing. So whatever you think you believe or know about Iran, once US led imperialism gets involved, we should all make it our business to recognize the importance of primary and secondary contradictions. Primary and secondary contradictions. I was talking to someone I know who's from that region of the world and is, dedicated to Islam, is a leader in, a mosque here in Sacramento. And this person was telling me a couple of weeks ago that, in the Middle East community, I mean, this is what they're saying. This is their perspective. I'm not saying it's truth, but this is their interpretation. What they were telling me is in the Middle East community, everybody looks at Iran as, um, the kind of the stepchild, like, because they're always on the bad side of imperialism. That's not a bad thing for them to do that to me, but I'm telling you, that's with this person, that's their perception. And this person is not a revolutionary, so you can take that and do whatever you want with it. But what they were saying is that that's how they view Iran. But once U.S. imperialism gets involved, as this person told me, all of us become quote unquote team Iran. And that approach, even though that's not what I agree with, but it makes sense from a practical standpoint because it's a question of primary and secondary contradictions. And that person, the reason why I'm using their statement is because the statement illustrates that they understand the difference between primary and secondary contradictions. The primary contradiction in the world is US led capitalism and imperialism. That's the primary contradiction. Then there are a number of secondary contradictions, right? Secondary contradictions are things like, I don't like patriarchal African men. That's a contradiction. That's something we need to do something about. But the first thing we need to do is get rid of US led capitalism and imperialism. We're fighting patriarchy while we do that. But the first aspect of any struggle is the national liberation struggle. And if you study history on national liberation struggles, those struggles involve unity with all kind of people you don't agree with. You don't come out before you have won the question of land and talk about, well, I don't like you because you're entrepreneur. No, you wage that struggle. And then like China did, once you win, then you go after all those people. That's how that goes down. That's how you do that. You gain strength and you go after them. You go after the patriarchal people, the homophobic people, the all those kind of folks. You deal with that after the fact. But now we need unity. That's not a primary contradiction because that's not the force that's uh causing us to have to not even understand if we're going to be alive tomorrow, you know. And I'm not trying to diminish any of the secondary contradictions. I'm just saying that if you look at history, that's how the struggle was waged, right? You have primary, secondary contradictions. No question about that. Drug abuse, that's a secondary contradiction. We don't, that's not the first, like when people come up there talking about, well, we got to stop drug abuse, they don't understand how to wage a struggle. That's not the first thing that needs to happen. It's very important. It needs to be dealt with. But we got to deal with the chief contradiction on the planet Earth. And we know what we have shared with you is correct because of our constant political education. You can't refute anything we've said in this program. You could try, but you're not going to be able to do it. Everything we talked about from 1951 on up to present day is accurate. So if you don't have the type of political education that provides you that kind of knowledge and understanding of this situation, then you should start one. You should, if you're African, you should join the All African People's Revolutionary Party and start going down that path. If you're not African, you should join some organization that has political education. If you're African, you can join other groups like, you know, the Black Alliance for Peace. There are all types of groups who have it. And if you're not African, then you can do that. And if you don't have it, you need to start one. There is no neutrality, you all. None of that. You're either on the side of justice or you are against justice. You can't say, well, I don't have a position on them attacking Iran. If you say that, by the very nature of saying that, you're on the side of international imperialism. And we thank you for joining us. Come back next week, May 3rd. We're going to have a program. I will not be here. I will be out of the country, but Dr. Shakura will be here, and she will be talking about unethical experimentation against women and how Pan Africanism uh, fits into that. So don't want to miss that. Join us. The red and white QR code at the left. Of course, you get the programs. Forward Ever Shop, Hood Communists, do that. If you're here in Sacramento area, come through on Thursday, 6 to 8 p.m. 2775 Cottage Way, like the cheese, Unit 15, 2775 Cottage Way, Unit 15, Community Self-Defense. Definitely want to see you there. And get ready for African Liberation Day. Go to our website, which is www.africanliberationday.net, no spaces. You can find the commemoration happening closest to you. If you're where I am, we're doing it in Oakland. That's the flyer on the screen. It's at the location of it is in Oakland at the East Arts Alliance Center. You can contact us for more information. 2277 International Boulevard. It'll always be East 14th to me, but you know, that's for those of us from the Bay or the Yay, as E40 calls it. It's East 14th, but the capitalist system now calls it International. So 2277 International East Arts Alliance, 1 to 4. You want to come through Saturday, May 23rd from 1 to 4, and then you should donate. Help us support our African Liberation Day programs, primarily in Africa at Venmo, AAPRP at AAPRP. So please do that. Join the AAPRP. You can go to our site at aaprp-intl.org and you can do that. And then the bottom black and white QR code on the right, that's the work that we're doing in the Sahel region, Burkina Faso, Niger, that region there. It's on fire. We're bringing in books so people can have real education. You know, if you know anything about Africa, the majority of books over there are taken over there by missionaries. And so the books that you find in Africa in the schools are See Jack Run, See Dick Run, See Jane Run, Huck Finn, where you know the N word is every other word in that book. That's not what we need in Africa. We need literature that promotes self-determination. So the work that we're doing there is designed to do that. So become a monthly sponsor, $5 a month, 10, 15, 20, do that. And finally, my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. The QR code is right next to it. Only $8 US. It's a really good book. Don't take my word for it. There are like almost 70 reviews on it on there, and I don't know those people. I didn't pay them anything. I wouldn't know them if they walked up to me and slapped me They're saying it's a good book. And so buy it. 100% of the proceeds go towards the anti-fascist work. Like, I had to drive up here. I had to have supplies to do these 3 trainings this weekend for about 60, 70 people, whatever it was. And I had to pay for that, so I use the money I get from the book proceeds. And the work I do keeps communities safe, and that means keeping you safe. So help us get that book. Call your library, have them order it. If you've already got it, call your bookstore, have them order it. That's a good thing. And 100% of the proceeds go towards this anti fascist work. So we appreciate you joining us. Have a great rest of your day. Forward.